if you internalize this quote, you would never, ever need to read a strategy book or do anything ever again, because you would already be the genius. And that quote is, find out who you are and do it on purpose.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. If you haven't looked at it so far, I encourage you to go to 40strategy.com. We have our next workshop that's ready to be signed up for. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please take a look. Our last workshop that we had a 100 net promoter score, which basically means everybody who attended would recommend it towards others. So I encourage you to go to that. It was an incredible event. And if you are a business owner and you want to think about how to develop your strategic plan for the upcoming year, go and sign up now. Only 40 business owners get to attend. Well, which leads us to what I'm really excited about is one of the best things I love about the podcast is we get to talk to people around the world who have expertise in what they do. Alex Smith is a business strategist, author, and the founder of Basic Arts. What does he do? He helps founders and CEOs cut through the noise and build clear, practical strategies that actually work. Sound familiar? Yes, we do a lot of similar things, and I love the way how he learned it. He has a book I recommend that you read. Of course, we don't swear a ton here on the podcast, but it's the title, No Bull, Bullsht. So No Bullsht Strategy, and asterisk there, a guide to defining real competitive advantage and making smarter decisions in complex environments. Alex, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me. Great to be here.
And as noted, Alex is in England. So when I say we talk with people from around the world, it is true. It is very common that we have guests from outside the US. And I'm super excited to talk to you, Alex. So I want to talk, I always love like the interesting stories about how you got to what you're doing. And one of the things you shared with me is you didn't come to it the uncommon way. Matter of fact, you had a bit of failure, so to speak, to get to. And now you have these same firms wanting to hire you to talk about strategy. So tell us a little bit about that story about yourself and how you got to doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes joke that my USP as a kind of strategy expert is that I am probably the least educated and experienced strategy person on the planet, which doesn't sound like much of a compelling pitch, really. I probably keep that one a little bit more under my hood, but in the end, it is probably the thing that's driven a lot of my leverage on social media and with the book and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I started off with a incredible failure in the corporate world. I worked for EY and they fired me, and I worked for L'Oreal and they fired me, not for any like sexy gross misconduct, just for being generally crap at my job. And then I went into the world of agencies, like sort of marketing agencies. Well, one to be precise. And that was all sort of, that was all kind of fine. But basically, over time, I was noticing what was going on with clients and how it occurred to me that, some of these businesses who we were working with seemed to be really switched on and good, effective, successful, high leverage. But most of them weren't. Most of them were kind of like a bit of a mess. And I became interested in, what is the difference between these clients that are kind of good and the clients that are sort of rubbish? And I started to develop all these sort of theories, observational theories about what they were. Now, bear in mind, at this time, I had barely familiar with the word strategy. I'd certainly never read any strategy-related stuff, Blue Ocean Strategy, Porter, any of that, any of these classics. I was just looking at what I thought worked and just saying, oh, that's interesting. And I built up this little kind of body of theory around what I think makes a business, the way that I was thinking about it at the time, because I was in the marketing space. I was sort of like, what makes a business kind of so effective that it kind of markets itself, right? That it doesn't have to spend lots of money on advertising. That was my lens at the time. And I went out there and then I tried to sell this like completely original, groundbreaking, set of ideas. And I did a TED talk, which was quite successful, got a couple 100,000 views. And then somebody in the comments said, oh, this is just like Blue Ocean Strategy. And I was like, what are you talking about? What even is that? Anyway, probably about 2 years later, I wasn't very quick on the uptake. I read Blue Ocean Strategy and I just put my head in my hands and I was like, this is a disaster. Everyone's going to think I just copied this damn book. All of these great ideas I've had, turns out, rather than like gradually compiling them over a number of years, I could have just read a book and pretty much had like 80% of the same thing. So that was pretty sad. But once I got over the shock, there was a positive angle to it, a silver lining, because what I realized is, well, hang on, if I am this kind of like supposed expert consultant, whatever, and I don't really know about these fundamental strategy principles, no wonder that most of my clients and the people I meet and speak to, they don't know about them either. Just because that stuff is out there, it doesn't mean that people pay attention to it. It doesn't mean that they listen. I mean, you know how it is. You know, you work with various business owners. I'd be pretty confident to say that most of them do not know do not know Blue Ocean strategy back to front or any of these things, which is unfortunate because, you know, it's great material. So I realized that what I'd inadvertently done was created a kind of new language, a more sort of simple and kind of less, let's say, academic language to talk about strategy principles, which opened it up to a whole wider audience. And then that's how I then built my audience on LinkedIn and my newsletter audience. And then the book came out, and then that's been very successful. And so, yeah, in the end, it's kind of about introducing strategy to people who need to know about it, but for whatever reason haven't really connected with the ways of talking about strategy before.
I genuinely love this story, Alex. And there's a bit of parallel to it in my story. And I don't think I've shared this on, so I'll just briefly, and just you and I have never connected before, but I started as a bean counter and became the CFO for a small company by the age of 30. And I didn't know what strategy meant. I literally, the CEO, Alex, he would say to me, I would like try to do something. He said, well, let's talk about strategies. I'm like, what do you mean? I like had no idea what he was talking about. And I was in one of the major accounting firms, and I was with a publicly traded company for 5 years. And I literally didn't know what strategy meant. It's ironic, as here I have a company, 40 Strategy, I mean, today. But what I did get the opportunities, I learned from Fortune 500 executives who worked in small companies. And they started teaching me the principles for like 12 to 15 years. I started learning how to do it the right way. What was interesting was when I opened up my firm, right before I opened up the US, Australian-based company, the Cascade, I started reading about 300, a bunch of audiobooks and reading some books, about 300 business and leadership and strategy books. And I had about the same thing though, Alex, too. I was like, oh, wait, I'm already doing this. And here's the research to back what I've been doing for years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was this big aha moment that I was like, oh, wow, I am actually more effective. I am more productive. But there is something I think that's really important. There's two cases. There's strategy at three levels. Historically, strategy was about war. And war is just frankly not very relevant to most people in business. I mean, it is, but it isn't, right? You know what I mean? It's like you're not killing people, like literally. There's a competition aspect, but it's not the same. And the second level, it's been large Fortune 500 or really big company strategy, completely irrelevant to the vast majority of business owners because we don't have the resources and the people to be able to do it at full level. And then there's strategy for the rest of us. And that's what you're doing. So, and that's what we do too, really. It's like, what I love it. It's practical, real strategy. So here we are. Now here in the strategy boat. And once again, I've got the notes to your book. What are the things that, especially I love it because you come to the branding side, right? Because so much about strategy is brand and about how to position yourself, right? To be able to sell your product and service it's going to sell. What has surprised you the most when you've talked about your message that really resonates when you're speaking with them?
It's always obviously the things that you consider to be so boring and self-evident that you're embarrassed to say them. But then, of course, like they aren't necessarily boring and self-evident to other people. So I actually did send, because I was curious about this, I sent a newsletter out a few weeks ago, basically saying, right, of all the ideas of mine that you've come across, like which is your favorite or which resonated the most with you? And it was a real mixed bag what came back. But there was one thing that was the clear winner, which was the notion of only is better than best, or the importance of a company doing something different rather than simply being better than its competitors. And this is like, I think the first hurdle for most businesses to get over, because it's very, very natural. It just seems like common sense that you think, right, okay, I'm a business and I've got competitors. How do I win? How do I get more business? Well, if I outperform my competitors, if I beat them, then naturally I will win. And so that's what I'm going to focus on doing. But this is like, it seems like common sense, but it is mind-blowingly ineffective way of approaching the problem, because essentially, if you I mean, this doesn't just apply to business, it applies to anything, but if you try to make X thing better than Y thing, think about what you have to do that. It means that you actually have to match whatever Y thing is doing. Because if you don't match it, then obviously that other thing is going to be better than you. But through the process of matching and sort of getting into lockstep with the competitor, you basically become the same as them. So therefore you drive commodification. So all of your efforts to be better actually just gradually make the two of you more and more and more alike. And it does everything that you essentially don't want to happen with strategy. And then and then the worst part of it is, even if you do become better than your competitor in some objective way. And by the way, I think it's extremely dubious, like what really is better, like, because it's all in the eye of the beholder. But let's just say that you do become better than the competitor somehow. You think, oh, well, then at least I'll win then. But no, the tragic thing is that you don't, because the market doesn't reward the better option. In those scenarios, the market rewards the most famous option, the one who spends the most on marketing, the one with the best relationships, blah, 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 blah. The graveyard is littered with companies who were better than their competitors. So the whole thing is like bad top to bottom. Whereas if you simply try to do something where you're the only one doing it, the question of better or worse doesn't factor in. It's a non-question. Then, assuming that you achieve that, well, hey, you're the only game in town. If someone wants that thing, they have to come to you, and you're cruising, right? So just this idea, be the only, don't be the best kind of thing. That is definitely the thing where, weirdly, it's a huge penny dropping moment for a lot of people.
Okay, so I once again, I love how you're talking. This is totally resonating with me, from my perspective, and especially small business, right? It's like we and I use this collectively. We in small business, when we use the term small business here in the U.S., we literally mean from startup up to under 500 employees. So it's a pretty big,
Yeah, so they can be quite big, really.
Yeah, exactly. You can be quite big to get to that point, but you can't compete in so many ways versus, right, the big players and the people who are already established, et cetera, who are out there and things. So let's talk about what unique is, because I think there's so much confusion as to how to truly be unique. Can you really be differentiated? Let's say you're a marketing agency, as an example, or you're an accounting firm, as an example. Give us examples of where something that seems ordinary can become unique.
The first little side point I'd say with regards to small businesses is that, depending on what type of business you are, sometimes, you can be a little bit relaxed on the unique thing up to a point. Because let's just say you're a marketing agency, take that example. Like, the good news for you is that because there's I don't know how many marketing agencies there are in the United States, like 20,000 or something, a lot.
Massive,
like
yeah.
the likelihood that your prospect has, they're only going to have seen 2 or 3 other ones. So if you're the same in terms of like your strategy and your offer and everything as another agency halfway across the country, to be real, no one's going to know. So that's kind of, I mean, you shouldn't copy them, but like you don't have to be as truly unique as, let's say, a automotive brand would be, where there's maybe only 20 players and everyone knows who they are, and then it's a much more pure dynamic. So that's a little side point. But yeah, you're right. The people people really, really have trouble with this question, and they do all sorts of like fake answers. So for example, like you might catch like let's use the marketing agency example. A marketing agency might say something like, well, yeah, we're unique because we're the only truly creative, like, agency out there, or something stupid like this, which we all know is just it's another way of being better, but you've phrased it to try and make it sound unique, but it isn't that. The only way that you really know that you're truly doing something unique, and this is where the kind of like the strategic art comes in, let's say, is when you're doing something which in some sense contradicts or disagrees with what your competitors are doing. So you basically you reject a strength or an offering or an attribute that would be considered to be the norm in your category. And then you take the opportunity then to bring in something new, which is incompatible with that thing, which means that if your competitors want to copy you, they actually physically can't. So, a classic example of this, you'll know all of the great textbook examples, like Southwest Airlines was only able to create the low-cost airlines category because they were prepared to give up business travelers. Giving up business travelers provided them with the unlock to then, in various ways, lower the prices and create that new category. But you see how they had to have that fundamental disagreement, that fundamental sacrifice in order to move away. The problem that you're getting with a lot of businesses, even if they understand the unique value thing, is they always think about strategy as being additive. So they think we're going to do everything that our competitors do, and we're going to do this other thing as well. Now, I'm not saying that never works, but generally speaking, if that was a good idea, why shouldn't your competitors just add that thing at all? There is no real strategic dynamic at play. But when you go out there and you are willing to sacrifice something, and then in order to bring something new in its place, that is where you're really playing the strategy game. And if we take myself, not a very small business, obviously a sort of one-man sort of consultant business, but in the world of strategy, I have to sacrifice things like rigor and professionalism and a lot of stuff which other strategy people think is very important in order to put across my sort of more direct kind of no BS version of strategy. So I'm not better than other strategy people. In fact, in many ways, you could argue that I'm worse. But through that sacrifice, I'm able to bring a new angle to the game. And that's just a very small example of the same thing.
So I think that's what you're getting at, I think, is super important, Alex, which is, and I'm saying this directly to the audiences listening and to you business owners who are out there, or people who are thinking about becoming a business owner. You are the uniqueness, right? You can never underestimate, like, Alex, you are the uniqueness, right? And the way and how you share and do and connect is always going to be unique to somebody else who's doing something. And so I think it's one of those pieces of people need to go into that more, right? They need to embrace that more of who, like what you said, who I am and who I'm not. Like, I love it how you said, hey, look, you're not going to see me. I mean, you were implying wearing suits and ties and being all buttoned up. No, I actually want to reject that and embrace who I am and where I came from, right? And I loved it. The irony says now you have Ernst & Young hiring you or other firms like to speak. Now, if you were acting just like them,
where would be the point?
We already have 10,000 of you, right?
Yeah, and look, it's you touch on something which, like, I think is a really good way of thinking about it. This isn't the way that anyone thinks about it, but it's a nice little thought experiment. Like, if you start a business, the reason people start businesses obviously is because it's naturally it's going to be for selfish reasons, because you want to be the boss, because you want all the money, whatever it might be, and that's fine. That's why you bother in the first place. But the way that you need to start thinking about it is that, like, unless your business is doing something new that wasn't available on the market before, your business should not exist. It doesn't deserve to exist. It is I'm being very harsh here. It's a parasite, because you're essentially coming along and saying, I want a piece of the bloody pie for myself. Now, when the world then doesn't care about that and doesn't respond to it, you can't blame the world, because you've come along and you're doubling, tripling, quadrupling up on what's already out there. You are operating from a very selfish place. So you really want to ask yourself, like, what is there actually any reason why this business should have even been formed in the first place? The correct motivation for forming a business, which you might only come to years after you've actually formed it, that's fine. The correct motivation is that you want to bring something to the table that wasn't there before. You've looked at the market, you've looked at what's going on in the world, and you're like, you know what, there's something missing here, and I can give it to them. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't start my business with that intention. You probably didn't. Nobody does. But eventually, you want to wake up to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also, um, there's this fine line, right, in the strategy in business and defining who you are, where at the end of the day, you got to solve clients' problems, right? It's this, I always find it interesting. Oh, you can do whatever you want. It's like, not if you can't sell it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this really interesting balance of you have to sell something that people are willing to part ways with, meaning their cash, right? To buy something from you of value that you can deliver to them. But it is, once again, is that clear uniqueness or combination of different services, or it's once I got involved, hey, we don't do this, and this is who you want to go to somebody else with. It's interesting in the very boring business of accounting. We're taking advantage of the fact that there's a 99% of firms here in the United States don't have enough staff. 2/3 of CPAs, certified public accountants, right, like a chartered accountant in England, are at retirement age. So what does that mean?
Really interesting.
Yes. So what does that mean is clients are not getting served. They're not getting served. They're not being taken care of. They're not being talked to. That's our competitive advantage. Like literally that. We're taking advantage of a market problem in our same industry. And what's interesting is this problem is we're not alone, meaning other industries are having the same problem. And those who are going back to what I'd say is just like traditional, no, yes. And just to clarify, we use AI, but it's like, no, we're embracing humans to serve them. Yeah, we use AI like crazy. I mean, we use it all the time, but our differentiator is serving people. So Alex, I think we hit that pretty good here. What's the next big thing, right? Of like, okay, you've figured it out. You figured out your uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next big stumbling block to actually get us to work?
So let's think about it like this: like the uniqueness. Funnily enough, it's I think that people do the work backwards, because what people do, and I'm not saying this is very logical again, but I just don't think it works very well. People, they will sort of, as you intimated, they will start with the question of the client problem. What does the client want? And then they will try to pull uniqueness out of that. Now, it's possible that you will discover something that the client wants that no one is giving them, and then you can give it to them and you're going to earn lots of money, and that's great. The problem is that normally your competitors are asking the same question and you're all coming up with the same answer, which is why, in my view, you're actually better off doing it in the reverse, where you start with uniqueness, even if it actually seems like a slightly stupid form of uniqueness, and then you ask the question of under what circumstances might this uniqueness be valuable to customers? Because you can actually come up with much more creative and diverse array of ideas if you do it that way around. So I sort of encourage people to focus on the differences that you already have in the business, the weaknesses that you already have in the business, the quirks, the stuff that you didn't necessarily intend, and then ask, could this be of value to the customer? And then you come up with these new forms of value. Whereas if you just keep on focusing on like, what does the customer want? What does the customer want? You're just going to keep on getting people saying they want it to be cheaper, and like all this kind of like stuff, which is like actually like, you're like, oh, that's not very helpful. Then when you've done, so then when you have that, the next question is that you have to execute it. Let's say that like the deciding what your strategy is going to be and what you're going to offer in the market, and what direction you're going to take. That is kind of like, let's say 20% of the job. 80% of the job is just how far and aggressive you can take that. So there's this Dolly Parton quote that I use in the book, and I think this is the single most insightful and powerful strategy quote that any human being has ever uttered. And I think that it's literally, if you internalize this quote, you would never, ever need to read a strategy book or do anything ever again, because you would already be the genius. And that quote is, find out who you are and do it on purpose. Which at first glance, you hear that and you think to yourself, oh, it just sounds like some trite, just be yourself kind of thing. But no, there's actually real depth in this, because the first thing is, you notice that what she says is, she doesn't say decide who you want to be and then go out there and be it, which is what most advice people get given is. Instead, she's saying that the who you are is already innate. You don't get to decide it. There is in other words, there is leverage in your business that is already there. You didn't come up with it, but it's there anyway. Your job is to discover it and then drive hard into it. So the strategy process is finding out who you are, and then the execution process is do it on purpose, which in other words means do it in a very extreme, provocative, over the top way. Because you don't just want to be like, different from your competitors on paper, like, oh, in our pitch deck, they say this, but we say that. That's very, very mild, meaningless stuff. You want it to be like when someone looks at your company, they could tell you what your strategy is just by observing you. If we look at the great brands like IKEA, Red Bull, these sort of people, I mean, I know they're not B2B, so like it's a little bit easier for them, but nonetheless, you only need any old idiot could look at those companies for 2 seconds and you know the game they're playing and you know what makes them special and what their strategy is and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because they inhabit that strategy and they execute it so aggressively. So when you know the direction, you need to audit all of your business, every single thing that you do, internal things, external things, and every single thing you ask the question of like, okay, a business that was providing such and such to the market, whatever the unique value is, whatever the new direction is, how would they do this thing here and this thing here and this thing here? Now, some of those things, it's just going to be generic. You're like, well, to be honest, I would do that the way I'm doing it now. But a lot of them, you're going to see, we could actually do this completely differently. And when you then add up all of those differences, before you know it, you've created this truly original beast that looks unlike any of your competitors. And then you are in a position of strength and leverage.
Well said. I love the explanation. How do you measure success when working with your clients?
Well, of course, you never know up front whether a strategy is going to work. And the only proof obviously comes in the doing. So to me, but that being said, it's funny because I've come to see, this is a very sort of controversial opinion, which I'm not even sure if this is right, but there's definitely something in it. Sometimes I think that any strategy, so long as it's coherent and aggressively executed, will work, because the market tends to move to create space for clear, bold ideas. So we have this idea, right, that there can be a good idea and a bad idea. There can be a good strategy and a bad strategy. Now, don't get me wrong. Clearly, some ideas are just crap, okay? But you've probably got enough common sense not to go with just a really stupid idea. Any idea which is somewhat defensible, I believe that if you execute it very aggressively, it will work, because the people who need it will find it, kind of thing. So really then, if we just assume that the idea is probably good enough and it will work, the real measure of success doesn't become whether or not the strategy is effective. The real measure of success becomes how much the organization understands, embodies, and is inspired by it. How close can you get to the point where every single person working for that organization could tell you about this, boom, straight off the cuff. In the pub, somebody says to them, oh, yeah, what do you do? Tell me about that company. And they could just go boom, 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 boom. And they could lay out the thesis, the hypothesis, the gambit of the strategy. I think it's that level of passion and embodiment that is the real thing that is going to make something work or not. Nothing really to do with the actual specifics of the idea.
I think great insight. Okay, we just got like 2 minutes left here, Alex. Quick hitter here. What's one habit that you do to perform your best consistently?
I wouldn't say I do this very off as much as I should, but I think that having moments of silence and boredom during your day is very important. I'm one of those people who will, be listening to a podcast while I'm in the shower, will be scrolling on my phone while I'm on the toilet. Like, you're just feeding crap into your head 24 hours a day, which is a huge mistake for creativity. I have to force myself that, like, okay, I'm driving to the gym. I'm just going to drive. I'm going to resist, listening to a podcast or something like that. I think that this adds 20 IQ points if you can do this.
That's a really, really good suggestion there. How can people connect and learn more about what you're doing, Alex?
Well, I have created a bunch of free tools and templates where you can do this kind of strategy thinking as quickly and painlessly as is possible. And I put them on my website. If you go to basicarts.org/welcome, you can find it all there. And you can also find link to my YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'm pumping out stuff all the time. And the newsletter, of course, as well. So I just wanted to kind of like put all the resources there, and you can go and have a little dabble, have a little play. That's basicarts.org/welcome.
Alex, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the Measure Success podcast today.
Oh, it's been fun. Thanks a lot.
To everyone who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I highly encourage you to go out and check out what Alex is doing. He has, once again, go to his website, as he mentioned, which we'll, of course, have in the footnotes. And, of course, I do recommend you pull out his book, No Bullsht Strategy. From that, wishing you the very best at measuring your success. Have a great day.